I just started talking, so of course the dog comes over.
Nice. You talking actually helps because the mic adjusts to the volume level of your voice, which means it doesn't pick up as
Good.
much of the fan.
Oh, fantastic. I didn't know if you could hear the fans or anything.
Nah, not as long as you're talking.
All right.
Okay. Hey there, would you like to introduce yourself?
So, right then. Okay, so I'm Liam O'Mara. I'm the candidate for Congress in the 42nd in Southwest Riverside County.
Fantastic.
I'm also a professor of history, focused on the history of ideas.
What does that mean, the history of ideas?
The technical term would be like an intellectual or cultural historian. Basically, you trace the movement of ideas from place to place in their development. So I tend to look at large systems of thought as opposed to focusing on a specific event or sequence of events.
Gotcha. Interesting. That sounds distinctly Hegelian to me. At least as per my limited understanding of his extensive works. That's wonderful. What motivated you to run?
Well, that's kind of a complex issue. I guess the shortest way to boil that down is I'm kind of furious at 40 years of decline in the real economy following a lot of like neoliberal policies. I mean, we're down to 52nd in the world in freedom, 35th in health, 27th in social mobility. And I have to look students in the eyes and realize and explain to them that they will not have the same opportunities as previous generations. I mean, my generation, Gen X, was the first one in American history not to do well as its predecessor, as the boomers. And the millennials are worse off than me, and the Gen Z are worse off than the millennials. And I'm just kind of pissed off that so many politicians are just sitting there going, doing nothing as we become a developing country.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's difficult to really, oh god, how do I put this exactly? It's difficult to like really accept the feeling of a civilizational decline from the perspective of an individual, because I mean, like, Rome took forever to collapse. Frankly, any individual lifespan is going to see a very small segment of history, but really, like, in every material way, the proportion of our society's resources is just not being equitably distributed. What do you plan to do about that?
Well, there is, first off, there's a whole range of different bills or ideas. I'm going to walk in with a whole stack of ideas just because I'm a nerd, and try to find coalitions, work with people to try and get things done. But the single biggest thing that I think that I could contribute to politics, and one of the reasons to get into it, is that I'm accustomed to taking complex ideas and breaking them down for people in a classroom. So I want to contribute to that public sphere discussion. I want to be one of those people standing on the floor of the House, shouting and screaming and trying to get attention to something and giving media interviews and out there talking about issues to push us along, rather than just passively accepting where we are.
Gotcha. I see that the district you're in has, and this is what I'm mostly curious about, because I know, because I looked up, your history and your interests. I know I'm going to agree with you on so many ideological and political positions. But what I'm really interested in, I guess, is that gap that seems to exist between people with genuinely progressive ideas and making it in the broader political space. So in your case, for example, the district that you're in, I know it's pretty rough for blue. I think that historically California's 42nd tends to lean like 55 to 45 in favor of Republicans. And I was wondering, how well do you think your ideas sell to traditional Republican voters?
The short answer is that we're actually better off than your generic mainstream liberal type is in the district. And you can see that just in the history of the area and what kind of things have worked out here. If you go back to 2008, we had a candidate running that came within 2 points of beating the incumbent, and he did so by talking primarily about, economics, our living standards, kitchen table type issues, political corruption, constant war, issues that do have a lot of bipartisan appeal. Conservatives constantly talk about corruption is a big issue, and 90% of Americans think it's a huge issue. Trump's drain the swamp worked for a reason. Or the anti-intervention stuff. Again, this district was taken by Trump by 12 points. Trump ran as an anti-interventionist. It's not how he's governed, but of course we knew that. But the idea is still appealing. So focusing in on the things that matter most to a larger number of people has helped us a lot. Our outreach has been primarily to independents, and they're the key to the district. The district is right now about 38% Republican to 33% Democrat. So no one wins without the independents. And if you can touch them on their issues without offending them on other issues, it works. I actually have quite a few self-identified conservative supporters of the campaign, including some people who have gone from MPP and literally registered as Democrat just to register support for me. And they know that I'm a progressive. And it doesn't matter because I'm talking about the issues that matter more to them.
That's fantastic. I think that was kind of representative of Bernie's approach towards these issues as well. And it's that fundamentally, I mean, there are many differences between Republicans and Democrats, especially these days. But fundamentally, we do want good lives for our children. We do want good, stable jobs. We do want union representation in many fields. You know, even a lot of Republicans who generally denounce unions will praise their own. You know, there's we like these things, and by ignoring the culture war facade, this obsession with narratives, and addressing very simple economic truths that all of us benefit from, Bernie was able to get, I think, a pretty decent reception from Republican folk. And if you're able to do the same, if you're able to do the same, I think you would be a blueprint. In a sense, you would be an indication that you don't have to move further to the right to appeal to these Republican voters.
That honestly is one of the big reasons to run, because I want to show people, and this just comes again from me looking at the history of how this has played out. Progressives and literally people on the left used to dominate large parts of the heartland of this country when we talked about working class issues. It's not like people in rural areas were less socially conservative than they are now. It's that they were more motivated by the things that people were talking about. When we stopped going there, when we stopped actually talking about kitchen table issues and walked away, these are decisions that go back into the 60s and 70s. In the early 1970s, the Democrats made a conscious decision to focus on highly educated professionals and to abandon the working class, which opened the door to the Reagan Democrats phenomenon and the slow gobbling up of large parts of the working class by the Republicans. This has had disastrous consequences for the country as a whole, for our living standards, because while, Republicans will sometimes talk a good talk about people's lives, their policies are deeply destructive. So I think that we need to get back to talking to people. And win or lose, if we improve upon the past showings in a district this conservative, we're showing that this can work anywhere in the country, especially if the races are better funded.
I absolutely. I think this is one of the biggest weaknesses of the Democratic Party. It's why there are a lot of people on the left who say they don't want to win. They don't try very hard in districts that they feel they don't have an easy shot in. They won't run candidates in large swaths of the South, even though a lot of these people in the South are receptive to this messaging. So your opponent,
wherever they can, even though
1 second, sorry, your audio cut out from the beginning. Could you repeat that?
I'm sorry. And they'll frequently work hard to stop progressive candidates, even though those messages are going to resonate better with voters. So yeah, there's a reason people often say they don't really want to win. That's not really true. They want to win, but they want to win on their terms and on the strategy laid out by the DLC in the 70s, which they've been married to ever since.
Your opponent is going to be Ken Calvert, an incumbent Republican who's been holding the district for, I believe, 8 years. 28?
The numbers have changed 3 times, but he was elected in 1992.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
time for him to retire, I would think, especially since in that time he's authored almost no legislation, never chaired a committee. He's basically a ghost. And the things that he does back actively make our lives worse in this district.
What does he represent?
Well, he represents, first off, the military-industrial complex. His biggest donors are defense contractors, as well as real estate developers. He came out of real estate himself and has actually enriched himself at our expense. He was actually investigated by the FBI for some BS he did trying to buy land, knowing that it was going to be affected by a piece of legislation and then profiting immensely from it. He represents, well, the kind of race baiting law and order rhetoric. He's really doubled down on a lot of the policing narratives right now, focusing on fear of crime and fear of the other. He's encouraged a lot of anti-immigrant actions, going out and rocking buses full of asylum seekers, that sort of thing. He basically plays upon fear and emotion in order to cover up the fact that he's not actually doing anything to help anyone.
Yeah, that's the culture war narrative. That's what Republicans will do every single time when it's because Trump's presidency. What has he gotten done in 4 years? Damn near nothing, really. I mean, certainly there's legislation he's passed, the tax cuts. He's passed legislation to enable big business. But in terms of the building the wall, draining the swamp, these are laughable failures. So come re-election time, he plays up fear. He plays up division. For you to be able to unseat such an entrenched incumbent Republican, that would be an incredible upset. I mean, that would be almost like a model for future aspiring Congress people. Is this your first campaign?
It is, yeah. So we've obviously had to do a lot of work in terms of building name recognition, and that has been steadily growing in the year and a half, something like that we've been at this. And obviously the district has severe fundraising problems because people tend to look at a long-term incumbent in a conservative district and say it's not worth it. But we do really well with small dollar fundraising, and we have managed to build a fantastic data and field operation. And our numbers are right now the best they have been in this district since the 1990s. The primary turnout was better than it was in the 2008 primary when Calvert almost lost. So we really are laying out a message that does resonate with a much wider audience and showing the ability to build larger coalitions.
That is incredible to hear. How do you plan on responding to the BLM, the Tough on Crime narrative? Have you talked much about your thoughts on this or what you would promise to do about it if elected to Congress?
We have a bit, and of course he's tied me to the whole defund the police narratives and whatnot because it's great for fear mongering. I've actually pointed out, as far as the defund ideal goes, I wouldn't actually, fire any of the current police. I'd let them retire out, but put more money into other essential services to essentially make them less and less relevant. And I've tried to point to people in terms of a general argumentation on this, because I do talk about crime in the area and what the policing is generally aimed at. And the key issue always is poverty. And not just poverty in absolute terms, but even there, we have more poverty in the U.S. than Mexico does, more than the entire developed world. And beyond that, there's the questions of relative poverty. People will often throw out the higher crime rate that you see among African Americans, but they leave out the 10-to-1 wealth disparity between Black and white America. And that has a significant impact on how people grow up and their perception of the world in which they're in. So I keep saying, if you want to lower crime, solve the freaking social problems in the first place. Put money in people's hands, provide adequate social services, provide healthcare and jobs and housing, and crime rates will plummet, which in the long run cuts down on the need for a lot of this really aggressive policing, which of course will solve the problem of massive police brutality.
Yeah, that's the old saying, right? The safest neighborhoods don't have a lot of police. The safest neighborhoods have a lot of nice infrastructure. That's right. What they have more than anything else. The most police are in the worst neighborhoods. So there's clearly not a positive correlation between the presence of police and the uplifting of these communities. Not to say police don't have their functions, of course, but yeah, addressing things from a socioeconomic perspective. I graduated with a degree in sociology, so I'm always inclined to see things from that perspective. But I think the data works out there just pretty darn well.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. But it's always difficult for people to kind of like win these empirical arguments when you have these really compelling culture war narratives. And the incumbent, of course, is like circle the wagons, protect the police. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let's protect the police by putting them less often in harm's way by actually reducing the causes of crime. It's a matter of, and I try to do this in almost every single issue in the campaign, I try to drill people down to the core issue. What is actually causing it? Instead of dancing on the surface. I see constantly in politics, on left and right, people basically slapping a Band-Aid on a hemorrhage. They're not really talking about the real problems, they're talking about symptoms. Trump himself, for all the ire and motivation that he gets for a lot of like liberals to come out and vote and whatnot, Trump himself is not really the problem. Trump is a symptom of long-term decline. Trump was made possible by Reagan and Bill Clinton. If we can't really address those core issues and start pushing back against this right populist narrative, we're going to end up a literal fascist dictatorship, and we are teetering on the edge of it already. But the solution really to right populism is left populism, not milquetoast centrism. You have to address the core issues that motivated it, because frequently right populists, they do touch on legitimate problems, they just have no idea how to solve them, and we do.
That's been my complaint for such a long. There are right populists online, and that's always been my line with them. Agree with them on solutions, not on problems. Because when a right populist says the elites are strangling middle class America, you do not know which group of elites they're talking about. There are a lot of directions they can go with that. I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more, and I couldn't agree more with your assessment, I guess, of our path out of here. Liberalism, like very milquetoast, center-leaning corporate liberalism, has never exactly been an effective shield line against encroaching fascism. In fact, very often the two end up getting together at some point. And to an extent, they already have. The extent to which the prison and the military-industrial context or complexes have sort of backed the Trump admin. Kind of show what direction that presidency might end up going in. I want to turn on that with regards to the aforementioned liberal centrism. Do you feel Joe Biden is a good candidate to represent the Democratic Party?
That's kind of a complex question to ask a Democratic candidate, I think. But I would say no. In fact, Joe Biden is about as bad as Hillary Clinton was. And in fact, one of the reasons that there are a lot of current predictions saying that Trump is somehow going to pull this back off. He, of course, has all the advantages of an incumbent, but we're not running a candidate that's genuinely talking about the real issues. It gets back to the same kind of thing you had in 2016, where Clinton's campaign strategy was basically just orange man bad and to focus on disaffected conservative voices. But there are more disaffected populist and leftist voices than there are conservatives who will defect. Most Republicans are going to stick with this. In fact, Trump is more popular than any Republican president in the modern period. He's far more popular than Reagan ever was. So he's not going to lose those conservative voices. So it all really is going to come down to those swing voter issues. And populists have determined every single presidential election going back into the 80s except for 2004. They will be the decisive vote in this again. And if we cannot articulate an effective populist message that swings some of them back the way that Obama did in 2008, then Trump will hold a lot of them. I've often pointed out to people, as different as these guys are, as different as their policy prescriptions are, about 12% of Bernie's primary voters went to Trump. And that's based solely on the rhetoric. It's him talking about jobs. It's talking about saving the middle and working classes. People don't really generally understand the details of policy, but if they feel heard, it's going to motivate enough votes to matter. And I worry that Biden is not going to be able to do that.
I completely agree. I could fill the rest of this interview, in fact, with scathing criticisms of Joe Biden and of the DNC in general. I think at the moment they are at their very best, with all possible charity, a poorly constructed stick wall against the encroaching tide of fascism. So I'm and and we'll leave it at that, I guess. When
But
it,
that's really, it's a historical truth too. Liberals have never been able to stand up to fascist and neo-fascist movements, not anywhere in the world.
Nope.
The left can, and left populists can. Liberals do not. It's not an effective bulwark against these kind of arguments. So, and this again is me coming at this as a historian saying we need to get more involved in politics and push back against this.
No, I couldn't possibly agree more. With regards to the argument you were making about the economy, I completely agree. I feel like nobody talks about the economy anymore except in like two or three very specific, very meaningless ways. We talk about unemployment's not meaningless, but as a reflection of the health of the working class, it is very, very, very much an incomplete picture. And we talk about the stock market, and that's it. And those are the only two. And if the economy's good, it's because unemployment's low, stock market's high. And if the economy's bad, it's because the opposite. Nobody talks about any other metric, and for that reason, we free up all the remaining media airtime to talk about meaningless cultural issues or to play up conspiracy narratives.
I have been trying to make that exact point over and over for the entire time this campaign's been going on. You go back to the 1960s, 90% of stock market transactions were in the real economy, meaning the money circulating. So the companies that were worth more were the ones that employed more people with good jobs and produced more stuff. Today, it's 90% speculation. The stock market has essentially no impact on the overall economy. It's quite disconnected from it. And hopefully people noticed that it continued to soar as unemployment went up here during this pandemic. And job creation numbers, they don't matter if they're not living wages, if they're not good jobs. You can produce as many bullshit jobs making minimum wage as you want. It actually has nothing to do with the strength of the underlying economy, which is, and again, I try to make this contrast. Well, I try to point it out using the term real economy. The real economy is the money circulating, the money in the hands of the middle and working classes as they're buying and selling stuff. That's what we should be paying attention to. And the numbers in the media, they're irrelevant for the most part.
Yeah, we have it's two completely different economies, one of which represents actual, it doesn't have to be actual dollar bills, but actual money used by real people to purchase real things that go into real businesses that pay their taxes and sell products. But all we talk about is this vortex, this black hole economy where gravity doesn't work and the rules have absolutely no bearing on the way, like Tesla, for example. The fact that Tesla is considered like a top-ranking company or that it's highly valued in the marketplace is I have a thing for Elon Musk. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to bully specifically, but the fact that a company that exists in that way, that runs that way, is considered to be like this titan of our economy is ridiculous. And the fact
Apple,
or
the
Apple,
most
yeah.
company, what they make almost nothing. It's just a bunch of contractors in Taiwan or whatever cranking out their parts. There's a few designers in Cupertino. How is it more valuable than General Electric?
I don't know. And that's part of the point. They've made it so obtuse and complicated that no average person, unless they have an education or are very passionate on the subject, could ever really understand the way the economy works. They have abstracted it to the point where we're alienated from the actual consequences of our economic policy. So when somebody like Bernie cuts through and they're like, no, forget all of that. Real wages, real jobs, healthcare, working class people, and actually addressing. I almost feel like people are shocked. Like we have Stockholm syndrome from decades of politicians exclusively describing the economic reality through abstract buzzwords.
And people actually thinking frequently that we had good economies. I mean, it honestly bothers me when people talk, we had such a great economy under Bill Clinton, and we had such a great economy under Barack Obama. No, we didn't. We had exactly the same problems that we have now. The real economy remained in steady decline through the entire period. And both of those administrations passed things that contributed to that decline. What we had were great stock markets and low unemployment. That's not the economy. And until enough voters really get that on a visceral level, and I think this is one of the reasons that populists are our swing voters, because even if they don't understand the policy aspects of it, they do feel it, and they feel that insecurity, and they vote on the basis of it.
I completely agree. I think a lot of people forget that. I saw a mock-up of this for the 2016 election. I imagine it's going to be the same in the 2020, but if you took not voted, so if you're an eligible voter who hasn't voted, as a political candidate, they would have won every state in 2016, every single state. And we fight over them. But as you said earlier, right now, Republicans and Democrats are as entrenched in their respective candidates as they ever have been in all of modern American history. The number of people saying nothing could change their vote has only risen with each election. And now we're here, and we're battling over this this group of people who I think are apathetic. They haven't seen much evidence that the vote swinging either way will really benefit their lives. And I feel like it would only take one good presidency, one good candidate, one good left populist to show them that we absolutely can reach them. Their lives can be made better through policy. We just need the right people.
We do, but I'll push back slightly on the whole president part, because it would be still pretty easy, given how entrenched these different media narratives are and the corporate consolidation in media, to basically make any left populist presidency into a failure. The key action really has to be in Congress. We need 200 squad members. That's really all it comes down to. If we can get in enough candidates on clean money pledges willing to do the real work, we can pass real legislation. And at that point, it doesn't matter if the president's a milquetoast centrist. If a Democratic Congress overwhelmingly passes something, they're going to sign it. They're going to see the writing on the wall. We have to push from more from the state level and from the congressional level, and then from that gain control over the presidency eventually.
I couldn't possibly agree more, by the way, with that.
But these president figures, though, some of them can serve an important function in many ways.
Uh-oh. Oh, no. Sir. Uh-oh. There we go. Can we ask him if he'll bring back the locks? Oh, did he cut his hair? Wait, hold on. Did he cut his hair up for...
We have Dr. Liam.
Oh. Oh, here's the Young Turks.
O'Mara, thank you so much for being here.
Wow.
Yes, thanks for being here with us.
My
and
pleasure.
You're a congressional candidate.
I am indeed.
But you're also a college professor with a PhD in history.
Yeah.
Holy shit, this dude is a fucking dwarf warrior king. Holy fuck, he braided his beard.
Yes, I am. I actually can look back at what works and, craft new policies based on the evidence. I think we'd get farther.
And so you're running in, California's 42nd Congressional District, right? And so you're running to unseat Representative Ken Calvert?
Correct.
Why should Congressman Calvert be unseated?
Okay, well, first off, you can point to the issues of xenophobia. He's definitely played with a lot of racially charged imagery, pushed a lot of anti-immigrant rhetoric. He, at one point, encouraged supporters to go out and rock buses full of migrant children seeking asylum, which is just a terror tactic. But I think the things that stand out more to me, really, are him showing up frequently on lists of the most corrupt people in Congress. He's willing basically to take whatever money people give them and vote along those lines. And he's also missing in action as far as the actual constituents are concerned. He does not hold town halls. He does not answer questions most of the time. You can't get him to do much of anything. And his office has literally stated that if someone did not vote for him, he's not interested in talking to them.
And on this, stay on this topic of Congress, the current Congress, a lot of voters seem to be unhappy. A lot of voters are happy, a lot of voters are fine, but a lot of voters are unhappy. They felt like there was going to be some sort of like a stronger sense of change after the last election. Where do you stand with that? And then I also want to touch on where you stand.
Apparently what's happening is Discord is forcing an update, which is causing him to have to restart his computer. That's oh.
Huh.
Hello?
Hello.
I
It
knew
didn't even have to be. It just like turned the video right back on as soon as it opened again.
Hey,
But,
I knew they couldn't keep a good man down.
It was a Discord issue. It crashed the app, and then I couldn't restart it without it downloading a whole new package and updating itself.
That's okay. We were just having a dance party over here while you were gone. But I am happy to have you back. We actually saw, because people were linking in chat, a TYT interview from you back from 2019. You had some incredibly impressive beard braids back then. Or beard braids, sorry.
I was honestly both surprised, happy, and gratified that I did as well as I did among the Democratic base, despite not looking like a conventional candidate in any way, shape, or form. I mean, my endorsement to the California Democratic Party was literally unanimous, and I did it with a beard down to my navel.
What did you remove them because you felt you had to, or did you just decide?
Oh no, it was honestly more because my fiance was never a big fan of them, so it kind of gave me an excuse for a change. And honestly, I've changed my beard style quite a few times over the ages. I mean, I haven't seen my chin in 25 years, but I'd take the sides off, or I'd lower the sides, or I'd grow it thicker, or I'd keep it short. I mean, I used to change the style constantly. Somebody just said, "Why don't you grow it out and try with the braids?" And I was like, "Okay, cool, I'll do that." And it was like, I don't know, 6-7 years into it, which is the longest I'd had the same style in quite a while.
Man.
So time for a change.
Yeah, I haven't seen my chin in a while either. I'd always thought, beard braids would, sorry, I keep saying beard braids. Beard braids would be cool one day. But that is an enormous commitment, one way or another. Enormous respect on my end for those things. With regards to politics, though, the other thing, sadly, with regards to that, so anyone who's watching me, I think is going to be on board with your policies. Before you cut out, you said something I agree with so much, which is that building a base of power in Congress is our big step moving forward. And we can see that the squad, small as it is now, has already massively influenced at least discourse within the Democratic Party, and that growing from that point is useful, not only because that's power, but also because a progressive left president is never safe. Every 4 years, you never know. Whereas a progressive left congressional candidate could potentially reside in a safe district for their entire lives, moving the country left during. So my question to you is, if you were able to get into Congress, if you won, what would you do to try to consolidate that populist left power in the halls of Congress?
Well, ultimately, it gets back to the fight in the public sphere. And the Democratic Party has not been able to push back at all against the drift into neo-fascism from the right, because they don't have their own vision for solving the real problems. It just, there's nothing that they can say that's genuinely helpful there. So, I mean, well, we've gone from control of 3/4 of state houses to control of 1/3 of them. We've lost most governor's mansions. We've lost most presidential elections in the last 30 years. This is going to continue until you can start talking about issues that bring in those swing voters and that actually touch on. You mentioned that the largest share of the population are the ones who don't bother to vote. They don't vote because they think a lot of politics is bullshit, and I honestly agree with them. Most politicians are not really willing to talk about the real issues. They're not willing to sit down and face their constituents. I mean, hell, my incumbent hasn't had a town hall in more than a decade. He doesn't answer any questions presented by his constituents. He literally blocks them on social media. I mean, we need to get back to talking to real people about real issues. And I think, honestly, the way to do that really has to be in Congress and in the state houses.
Yeah, it sounds like he just doesn't really care anymore, or is maybe even contemptuous.
He is, yeah, and he knows that he can whip up his own conservative base to turn out every time, and he counts on the Democrats never effectively raising enough money and never running on issues that will resonate with enough of the swing voters. We have the latter already, which is why, again, the numbers that are best since the 1990s, they're the best since he got into office. But raising money in these districts is hard, and that's honestly true in conservative districts all across this country. But the message would work if we can contribute to it and run people in those districts. And if once you get in, you can hold them too, because you then have a platform to continue to articulate a vision that would genuinely improve the lives of ordinary people.
I couldn't agree more. Do you, should you win, do you plan on being as critical of the more moderate element of the Democrats from the left as some other members of the squad have? Do you intend on trying to pull the rest of the party left, if for no other way than by sort of shaming them for their, what I think is completely true, their complete inability to meaningfully respond to the economic anxiety that so many Americans are living with right now?
I think one key issue there, I mean, because, well, yes, but no, depending on the tactic you're talking about, because I think shaming honestly doesn't work terribly well, and certainly vote shaming doesn't work. In the same way that it actually bothers me that a lot of Democrats are basically attacking the Trump voters and trying to shame them for voting for Trump. Trump won this district by 12 points. You know, a lot of people supported him. We have to understand why and then win them back on the arguments. So my approach to the so-called moderate Dems isn't to bully them or shame them, but to show them empirically that their approach doesn't work, that it's ineffective, that it's not helping ordinary Americans, and to push things along. So it's a way of pushing back hard against that establishment, but I try to be as diplomatic as I can, which I think is one of the reasons that I pulled in so much of that traditional liberal base in my own race here. And I think that if you can do that, if you can run from the left within the party there and do it in a way that doesn't basically spit in the faces of a lot of those liberal Democrats, they'll still vote for you, because it doesn't matter if they're convinced by all your arguments yet, you're still the Democrat. And over time, your engagement patiently with them has a beneficial effect. It starts to change minds and bring them on board. But it's again, this is probably me being a historian. I tend to think more in terms of long-term strategies. How can we win these arguments? How can you draw people back to the kind of like FDR to LBJ sort of coalition that we used to have?
Yeah, no, I completely understand. The it's also a very fine line to ride as well. The Democratic Party has done, at least in my opinion, a very poor job of responding to a lot of the changes in circumstance this country has gone through since 9/11, mostly. Done a very poor job of addressing the hopes and fears of this country. And I think it's reflected in large part by the fact that we're still capable of losing elections when we have significantly more registered Democrats than we do registered Republicans. The fact that they're not doing the right things to appeal to their base. And if you can... And
they've forgotten what their base really is, which is why turnout keeps falling and why we keep losing the working class.
Yeah. I hope the Democratic turnout in the primaries was massive. I hope that it turns out to be the same for the general election and for the down ballot ticket as well, because it would be very disappointing if we stoke all this fervor through all of 2019, first half of 2020, and then Democrats just come out and they don't care. You know, they don't care to vote anymore. I think a lot of Republicans have a vigor that Democrats don't have when it comes to their respective candidates.
Right, and largely because of the types of overall national policies being pursued, and this is where it gets sort of complicated, and it kind of gets back to your Biden question. Fear is not a huge motivator for liberal voters. It's not a huge motivator for leftist voters. It doesn't work. Fear of Trump is not enough to drive people to the polls or keep them there. You have to offer a compelling vision for the country and how you can make things better. This is something we failed to do in 2004, something we failed to do in 2016, something we're failing to do now. But a lot of congressional candidates, a lot of state elections, people are beginning to do that. And there are people also at that, at top level, running for president, whatever, that are beginning to push us in the right direction. Honestly, I mean, I've been a fan of Bernie since like '91, watching him like scream about the Gulf War. But I was also quite appreciative of Andrew Yang's race, in large part because he was able to draw people from both sides of the aisle by talking about those core issues. If we can just get back to that kind of language and really talk about what would make life better, we can change this entire country.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Pivoting a little bit, I'm curious, to what extent has COVID-19 affected your ability to meaningfully campaign and organize?
Less to campaigning than I think people might think. I mean, obviously we can't be out there knocking doors. We're doing a lot of like big public events, but we do tons of Zoom events, and we've kept our phone banking and text banking teams very busy, and gotten really good numbers and results from that. I was quite appreciative of and thankful for having such a young, dynamic campaign team already, because we very quickly adapted to a more digital infrastructure. And as long as we can keep them funded, the field team is just fantastic at getting the calls, and the data team pulls together good lists. We did a joint operation with the California State Democratic Party with 14 congressional candidates, and we were 4 people short of second place in terms of positive identifications. We can pull together good lists and contact the right voters. So, I mean, we were able to adapt, I guess, is the key issue there. The most significant way that COVID affected us is the fundraising, because obviously there's a massive spike in unemployment. A lot of people lost jobs. There's tons of insecurity. So people started focusing on, the safer type districts.
Do you sorry. With regards to your with regards to your upcoming elections, you've said that you believe you have a very decent shot at this, and based on what I said before talking to you, I agree, because there are a lot of people across the country who are running as progressives, or sometimes even as socialists, and many of them are in deep red districts, and it's mostly just a way of consolidating power, getting visibility, legitimization, and I think that's wonderful. I think that's great. And I'm curious, as somebody who may very well be on the cusp of a successful campaign, or at the very least someone who's run a phenomenal one, what advice would you give to other people looking to run as progressive Democrats in red-leaning or swing districts?
Well, the first is to say, do it, because if we don't get involved, if we don't push the party, if we don't get involved in these primaries, that's how we end up with so many of these BS candidates in the first place. Our standing outside is never going to encourage the Democratic Party to reform. It doesn't matter how many elections are lost with these kind of neoliberals. That's not going to teach a lesson. The only way to change it is to get involved. And if we get enough electeds in, that gives us control over the DCCC and the DNC, because it's based upon electeds. So we have to get involved. The key thing that I would point to in terms of encouraging people is to be as conciliatory as you can, to try and work with people, to try and bring more people in instead of pushing them away. If you stand there in a kind of like self-righteous preachy mode, which I totally get, it's understandable. A lot of things really piss me off in this country right now, but it doesn't work. It's not effective. So it takes a great deal of patience to spend the time talking to people, trying to explain the perspective that you have there, and then showing them results from it. And the more good races we have, the more races that we win with squad members, and the more races we get close. I mean, I'm watching closely things like Kara Eastman's run. I mean, again, running in a red district, but running as a progressive. I mean, if we can do this, if we can improve upon the previous performances or win these seats outright, we are showing how this can be done. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to whether or not people are willing to support us. I make a lot of like cheesy references to, like, I don't know, you go to Starbucks or something, get a coffee. People are thinking, well, it's $5. Canada doesn't need $5. If you give $5 a month and you give it to several candidates, and then a few thousand other people do the same thing, we can win any race in this country. So this sense of hopelessness or helplessness, I think that a lot of the left has learned in this country. You think, well, I'm not super rich, I can't contribute, I can't run, I can't help out a campaign. Yes, you can. If you can afford $5, you can absolutely help.
I couldn't agree more, especially since, I mean, it could conceivably be a pretty good long-term investment too. You know, you put your money into that candidate. If they end up winning and end up being able to influence policy, that could end up.
And you're pushing the direction of the country as a whole, because every one of these candidates that you support is someone else who gets airtime, who gets to publish, who gets to talk about their ideas and push the country forward. And every one of them who wins is another person on the floor of the House pushing back against this corrupt system. So
ideally, I think
investments really matter.
Ideally, I think forever too, because at least from what we've seen with the re-elections of the squad, in their respective, primaries, in the safe blue seats that they have only consolidated a greater base of support than they had initially. I think what that shows is that once you show voters that these crazy radical left ideas are in fact viable, their candidates, their advocates are decent, reasonable people, not crazy fringe lunatics, then you settle on quite liking them, because in every conceivable avenue that a Democrat wants a representative to act in, I think one of our people, a progressive leftist or a socialist or a populist leftist or however you want to call them, will do better than any milquetoast, centrist, neoliberal Democratic candidate anytime. That we will always beat them.
Yeah, you're going to motivate more of the voters, and you're going to keep more of the people who normally don't care, as well as most of the people who already would have supported that party. So, I mean, again, it gets back to the point you made earlier. Do you want to win or not? And they only want to win in certain contexts. If we want to win and really change the direction of the country, this is where we have to go. So again, I want to encourage more people to run for local offices. Consider running for your city council, run for state assemblies, and run for Congress. Absolutely. Get involved in these things, because it's the only way we can really change the direction of the country.
Do you think we can do it? I mean, the election's bearing down on us. Do you think we can change the direction of the country?
Well, again, I think long term. Is any single election going to change the whole country? No, it's never how it works. All these things build up incrementally. We will have more than doubled the size of the squad in this election. So of the people we elected last time in 2018, we will have more than double this time. Just looking at things like Jones and Bowman and their primary wins, we are going to put more people in already. And if you do that every single time, if you double the number of squad members, and in the long run, that just means we have to step up and support more of these candidates every 2 years and get them in. In the long run, you get enough in, we pass public financing for elections, no one needs to give up their coffee money anymore. But if we aren't supporting, and I do this myself, I support House candidates running all over the country that I can't vote for, but I can vote with my dollars and I can keep their voices alive. If we keep doing that, we get enough people in, and that is what changes the country.
Has running for election been fun?
Yeah. I'd have to say, yeah. I'm always curious by nature and interested in new experiences and new lessons. There are so many things that I've had to learn in the process of this that have just fascinated me. As I walked in with, I'm basically like, okay, I'm a policy wonk, but how do you be a politician? Like, how do you deal with this? And I think the only useful, advantage I had to begin with there is at least some experience in the classroom teaching, as well as like I could relate to people more, because I was working class, and anyway, I didn't go to college till I was 30. But I'm relatable and can talk about the issues, but also a bit of patience. I'm a stoic, and it's hard to really kind of throw me off, I guess. So rolling with it has helped a lot. But there's no way to deny there's been a lot of things you have to learn. It's a steep learning curve. There's a lot that's involved in this. But to me, I don't know, I find all that fascinating.
Yeah, having not had the pleasure myself, I cannot endorse or condemn the experience. I've heard from a lot of people who have thrown their hat in the politics game. It seems very stressful, but it seems like altogether you've kept a pretty cool head, and I am incredibly excited and terrified by the upcoming election. I cannot wish you enough luck in the world. Would you like to shout yourself out or shout out any links in the end? Obviously, your donation and social media links will be posted alongside the video when it's released.
Yeah, perfect. So follow on social media. I'm very active on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that kind of business. We regularly record videos on YouTube and whatnot, and do town halls and interviews and all kinds of things, and that stuff all gets posted too. So you'll get to see me talking about a wide range of issues if you go back through those kind of videos. But yeah, I'd really encourage people to go to the website and really to sign up to volunteer and or to donate. And links are at the top of the website there. You can phone bank or text bank from anywhere in the country. It really does not matter. We connect people all through Zoom, and it's all done through like web browsers, all the text banking and phone banking. Super easy to do. And again, give up this learned helplessness bullshit. Your $5 or $10 add up. Everybody who can throw in there is helping to change the direction of the country, because you are putting people out there who are willing to talk about these issues and push us forward.
Yes. Anyone who planned on donating to me this stream, please redirect. And do consider phone and text banking if it's possible for you, because having done it myself, I know many of you have anxiety. You're on the internet, so I know you do. It is actually quite fun. It actually is. I swear to you, it actually is quite fun. And you bust out your social chops, you know?
And text banking is certainly easier for a lot of people than phone banking too. So if phone banking is too much, I mean, there's tons of it's pre-recorded answers in there that helps you out there, and I mean, it's not that difficult to get involved with, and you don't have to face somebody on the phone.
Yeah. Sir, I have had a phenomenal time speaking with you. The brief interruption of the center does nothing to dull my enthusiasm. I had a lot of I suppose excitement before speaking to you, and I am genuinely heartened to hear that you are running in with a decent shot. I wish you all the luck in the world, and I will be following your upcoming campaign with great interest.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Okay. Have yourself a wonderful day. Thank you again. Everyone, please do donate and be as kind as you possibly can. I cannot imagine a better campaign to donate your time and interest to. Okay. Be well.
Thank you very much.